You've probably seen reports about the French demos, the French riots, about Macron raising the pension age from 62 to 64. I don't think these demos are getting reported on enough. I almost get the impression that organisations like the BBC and other mainstream media outlets are a little bit uncomfortable reporting on it because it is such a systemic threat. My view is that they are very dangerous. They go to the legitimacy of the system and ultimately of the European economies because they threaten the entire euro. But but they are not an urgent threat yet. They're not revolutionary yet. They're not pre-revolutionary. You could call them pre-revolutionary. I have mixed feelings about them myself. On the one hand, I have a feeling of wanting to gloat and crow simply because the prediction I've made about Western economies breaking down, collapsing, and the welfare system and the currencies collapsing and the political systems collapsing, that this enhances that view. That tends to vindicate the prediction that I've made. So I feel I want to boast and crow about that. On the other hand, I think the demos are economically stupid. I'll explain why in a minute. It's been said that the French attitude towards economics is like the English attitude towards sex. They don't know much, and what they do know is hypocritical. And the third thing is acknowledge that when economies break down and when political systems break down, you get violence, particularly in a system like this, where people are used to being provided for, used to having all adult needs and worries lifted off their shoulders by the state. When the state can no longer do it, when the state breaks down, then people will panic. It will be as if the sky has fallen in, and I think people then will resort to violence. Massacre is an embedded feature of human nature, and it tends to come out during revolutionary periods. And if these demos, these riots are here to stay, they're not going away. If they continue in intensity, as I think they will, then they will bring down the system, and then I think the French will resort to violence, probably some form of military rule. But at the moment, what I see is that my prediction or my projection, not quite a prediction, that somewhere around 2026, 2027, we will start to realise it'll start to become a commonplace that our economies have stage 4 cancer, and that then the economies will break down and collapse and bring down the state systems with them somewhere around 2030, somewhere around the end of this decade. I'd probably say the early 2030s that will happen. Could be sooner. I think that is on track given these demos. I suspect that's why they're not being reported on very much. But what I want to do, I want to start by just outlining them what's going on a little bit by looking at this Sky News report. This is a pretty good report here from Sky News. That's from 9 days ago. The ruling on France's pension age looms. Why have the plans triggered mass strikes? So that was when the Constitutional Court was going to rule on the legality of Macron increasing the pension age without a parliamentary vote. Now, I'm going to skip most of this. You can read it for yourself. But this is the bit I want to look at. What is the retirement age in France and how is it changing? France's state retirement age is 62, much lower than in any of its European neighbours. In the UK it's 66, Germany and Italy 67, and Spain 65. So if you look at that timeline, that's pretty good from Sky News. They're doing a reasonable job just giving the numbers there. What it shows is Belgium has 17 years of life expectancy where the state's supposed to pay for you. France has 21 years, and Germany has 15, the UK has 16, the US has 12. So there's a lot of old age that France has to pay for. It was 60 until Sarkozy, about a bit over a decade ago, he increased it amid a lot of protests from 60 to 62. Okay, now there's a bit more detail going down here, and this is relevant. What it shows is just how pointless and trivial the reforms are. Macron is not trying to save France. Macron is trying to create cosmetic change that he can boast and brag about, that he can try and convince the markets temporarily, that he can use to convince the markets that he's a good ruler and that France is an economic success. It won't work. Okay, French workers can receive a state pension from the age of 62, but it will be less if that person has not made the required number of contributions. So you have to make contributions to get the full amount, but at 62 you can get a state pension. Age 67, French people are entitled to the full state pension regardless of their contributions. So one thing you can observe is if that retirement age goes up from 62 to 64, all it means is that you have 3 years of reduced pension instead of 5 years. The result of this is going to be that people are just going to contribute less into the system. I think this reform actually will be counterproductive for that reason. Anyone who's been dumb enough to pay into the French state system in the hopes that they can get the full amount at 62, they're going to be kicking themselves now and say, well, what did I do? It's only 3 years. I've been putting all this money in for decade after decade just to get a bit more money for those 3 years between 64 and 67. So it will harm state finances. Then Mr. Macron's changes will see the age that workers can receive the state pension increase to 64. This will be done gradually by 3 months a year from September 2023 until September 2030. Okay, two things here. That is pathetic. So every year the pension age will increase by 3 months over 8 years. So after 8 years it will go up to 64. The second thing is he is inviting protest for 8 years. Protests whilst French people want to halt that increase. So that's he's not tearing off the band-aid right now. He is allowing it to drag out for 8 years. He's ensuring that there'll be more of these protests. And the French state, I very much doubt it will still be standing up in 2030. I don't see how it can be, given the demographic change. I think it is more. The majority of babies born in France, I calculate, are non-white, certainly non-French. Plus there's the dire state of French finances, which are probably like the state of the finances of the Eastern European bloc before the Berlin Wall fell, just in total chaos, and no one except the head of state knew what chaos they were in. Basically no financial management, nothing but fake figures. I think that's probably true for France. So it's not going to be standing up in 2030 anyway. These changes will have no effect on the state of the French economy. Okay. This quick report here from this Mishtalk blog. Enormous protest against Macron and the French government in France. Epic protests in France as the latest poll shows 71% of the French oppose the pension reforms. Again, I'm hard on the lack of economic literacy amongst French people. You don't. If France increased its pension age to 74, that still wouldn't be enough to save the French economy. You would have to have massive cuts right across every area: healthcare, welfare, schools, roads, just every aspect of the French welfare state. French-run industries, they would have to just start firing hundreds of thousands of people just for France to have a hope of surviving economically. So the fact that the French people won't even allow this trivial change does not reflect well on French economic sense. But given that, fair play to them, the French are really making their views known. Now the point about these demos is that I think they are permanent, they are pervasive, and they are personal. Permanent, they're going to keep going, and they are pervasive. They are all over France. They're arising spontaneously in pretty much every town and city, and they're personalised. They are joining up. All the cracks in the system are joining up, and all of the opposition is being directed against the personalities in government. That is not a good sign. I'll go through that in a little while. But what I want to show you is just this map. This is the map for a day of protests they had on the 28th of March. France seems to have a national day of protest about this every week. So the next one was on the 6th of April, and the one after that was on the 13th of April. Every day there are protests like this. I would say mini riots are rising, just peppered right across France. But this was the 28th of March. Just look at that map. Okay, so that's Paris. The unions claimed 450,000 people. The police claimed 93,000. Then down in Toulouse, 150,000 according to the unions, 18,000 according to the police. All these, I mean, towns that I've never heard of. So Masson, I think I might have heard of that. What's this town there? Mende. I'd never heard of that town. That's having a demo of 1,200 people. I mean, consider for a town I've never heard of. You know, I've spent quite a few holidays in France. Or this one there, Rodez. I think I just about heard of that. 3,000 people. I mean, that is pervasive. That is breaking out like measles. That's like smallpox breaking out. That is a sign of protests that are embedded in the population and are just arising without provocation. They're going to continue. Now let me show you what a few of those demos look like. Here on Twitter, if you can see that one, that's in Toulouse. Now that is the one that the police said was 18,000. Looks like more than 18,000 to me. So let me just play this. I'll keep the sound switched off. It's just music anyway. But if you can see that all across that bridge, and if you see as you get beyond the bridge, it continues there. I think that's more than 18,000 in Toulouse. Those are big demos, and Toulouse is not. It's a city. It's certainly not one. It's not the main city. It's not like Lyon or Marseille or Paris. Okay, and then if I go to the next one, let's see. Now that's Paris, and that was on the same. That was on April 13th, and that previous one was that was April the 6th. So not March the 26th, but April the 6th. This one is Paris on April 13th. Again, I'll keep the sound off. It's just a little bit of shouting, nothing very significant. But that is a big demo. There's a lot of people are willing to turn out week after week in the streets for some pretty big demos. They are prepared to create and to endure a lot of inconvenience. That is stopping a lot of traffic. That is bringing towns to standstills. All of these demos, by the way, they're occurring during weekdays. There seems to be a lull during weekends. I guess the French like to have the weekends off, and work days are for rioting. Well, that's let them do it. But I guess it's part of their artistic culture. There is quite an artistic sense to French demos. And this is not just rioting in the streets. This has spread. It is targeted at the rich, at big business, and that again is part of the rooted, spontaneous nature of this. This is how revolutions happen. Again, I'll go through this a little bit in a moment. But I just want to show you what the French are doing to try and get back at the big businesses that they don't like. This one is. Globalists now protest at BlackRock head office in Paris. The globalists are starting to run into some bother as the world awakens from its slumber. You know BlackRock, that's the big American corporation. Let me just play you this with sound. Give me a moment. Okay, so what you hear there is the song that keeps getting repeated throughout these demos, and that is "On est là," we are here, we're on our way, we're on the move. Now the next one, I won't play this. This is from a Sky News report. Railway workers invade Louis Vuitton HQ as protests erupt across France on the eve of a decision on retirement age. So Louis Vuitton, I think the parent company for that is owned by the richest man in the world, a luxury goods fella. The French are really good at luxury goods, and the French luxury goods head honcho has topped the global rich list. So a bunch of railway workers invaded the HQ of Louis Vuitton. So you can see that similar with the flares the same as they did in BlackRock. There's nothing to play there. I don't need to. The next one is this one. Hold on, and this is where they The French protesters stormed the stock exchange. I will play that because I think, again, these protests are not purely about rioting in the streets. They're not purely about political protests. These are social and economic protests. People are saying, we don't like the system. We're prepared to bring it down. They're not prepared to bring it down just yet, but they are communicating that they are. Now, you would think that if you want more money out of the system, you would allow the system to carry on making money. What they're communicating there is, no, we're willing to bring the system down if we have to. We will stop it making money just to make you suffer until you give us a bit more money. It's kind of this is a bad logic. It's not going to end well. But that's what they're saying. This is French people. They're entitled to do that. Now, what I want to do now is to give you a flavour of those demos where I showed you that map here, if you bear with me. That map there, I want to show you a flavour of what those demos look like, because they tend to have common features. Small to medium fires in the streets, tear gas fired by the police, roads blocked. Okay, so this is quite a good feed on Telegram. It's called Gallia Daily, Voice of France. Let me just go up a bit. Hold on, give me a second. Okay, so this one is that's Paris.
Ils vont utiliser des gaz lacrymogènes. Voilà.
So what you see there is people banging the pots and pans and the mob-handed police. The police are ready for action there, and they're just firing off tear gas canisters. And that one, this is Paris as well, just a few seconds. That is typical, setting a fire in the street, blocking the road. A lot of smallish fires. This is not revolutionary, but it is incendiary. And you see this one here, again, another one, Paris, just shows you the numbers. Banging pots and pans and just coming out in the street pretty much every night. Now let me go down a bit, and there you have, that's Besançon. Let me just play that one. Again, another little fire in the middle of the street. If I go down a bit further, there's another one there. That's Bordeaux. And that one is setting fire to a police station. That's in the southeast of France. And if we go down a bit further, that one is in Lyon. If I can play this one. Okay, that says massive fire. That is a big fire in terms of these demos. Normally it's a small fire in the street, a few rubbish bins, maybe bits of a bus shelter or a car. Just enough to block the street and show we mean business. Now the other side to this is the way it's, or another feature, is the way it's personalised. It is directed against the personalities, the ministers, and particularly Macron. Now this is another Telegram channel, this fellow, Anonyme Citoyen, I don't know who he is, but that map there, that is the map of the welcome committees on that day for when ministers are going to go out, open a supermarket, walk around a shop floor, pretend they know how ordinary people live. And so they're greeted by ordinary French people banging their pots and pans like Ruprecht in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Okay, if you've seen that movie. And I'll play you something so you can see what it's like. If I start with this one. Okay, I'll go down a bit further. There's another one there. More banded coppers. There's another one. That's Don't know where that is. So what you get is a lot of pop banging. That's another feature of it, and that song On est là. What's also interesting is a lot of other issues appear to be riding on the back of this.
On va se mobiliser. Je vais vous expliquer tout simplement comment on va faire pour...
That looks like a pretty big demo to me, and that's in the Loire, where they want to defend an ambulance service. And they wouldn't normally come out like that for an ambulance service, but this... my point is that the protests against the pension reforms are kicking off a lot of protests against a lot of other discontents, and it's all coalescing. I'll come to that in a bit more in a second. Now this is a fellow called Hugh Schofield. He's the BBC's Paris correspondent. He's quite likeable for a BBC correspondent. What he says here I think is relevant. I want to play this because what it shows is that it's not really or even mainly about the pension, the increase in the pension age, the so-called pension reform. It's really about the underlying discontent, the underlying sense of failure and increasing poverty that people are protesting against. There is a pervasive, that adds to the pervasiveness of these protests. So let me play this bit now.
Is concerned about pensions and pension ages. You know, if the government says we're doing this, then everyone is affected. That's part of it. But I think the other part of this is that, I mean, you get this whenever you talk to people in these protests. I mean, very quickly the subject goes off the pensions and onto all sorts of other things which people are complaining about. And if you talk to a student, it'll be about, you know, students' problems. If you talk to a fisherman, it'll be about fishermen's problems. If you talk to anyone, you'll find that there's a range of problems, and it's just a kind of general mood in the country which is extremely down and angry.
So that's the BBC News Paris correspondent, a general mood in the country that is extremely down and angry. I think that to me explains why the BBC, they're not having this guy on more. I don't see him very much on the BBC. They're not reporting on this very much. I think it's because it's they know how dangerous it is and how insoluble it is. And the point is, my point is that what you have is the cracks in the economy, the fissures joining up, and that is dangerous. It's a bit like if you have one crack in your ceiling, that's okay, you can fill it in, paint it over, you're okay. If you have several cracks in your ceiling, that's probably okay. If you have half a dozen cracks in your ceiling and they all join up, that probably means the plaster's going to fall on your head one day. There's this is a book I don't recommend. It's called Ubiquity. It's nerdy and boring, but I read it. One of the things it talks about is some scientific research that was done into just sand piles, why you get avalanches, and they did it. They dropped a grain of sand, and they tried to work out how you can predict when a pile of sand will collapse, when there'll be an avalanche in the pile of sand. They didn't discover, they discovered nothing very useful, so far as I'm aware. But what they found, it seems to have been a good model for the breakdown of complex systems, especially financial systems. And the principle was that you tend to get cracks, what they call fingers of instability, fissures within the pile of sand, and they'll always be there. It's when they join up, and that is when that pile of sand is likely to collapse. You can never quite predict it. You can never say this grain of sand will cause the collapse, but you can predict when a collapse is likely, and that is when all the cracks start to join up. Now that is what is happening in France. Everyone is joining in with this sense of being, as Hugh Schofield there said, incredibly down and angry. And there is just no getting away from it. You go to, Macron goes to the Netherlands and he gets heckled there.
Humanity and our common values. Hello.
What can you say when you talk about Europe?
You deliver such strong messages not just for Europe, but for humanity and our common values. Hello. I I can answer this question if you...
So he thinks he's on a nice junket to the Netherlands to talk his global rubbish about humanity and common values and a lot of arm-wavy sanctimony, and they pursue him there. He just can't get away from it. It is personal. They are sticking it to him and his ministers. So pervasive, personal and permanent. But there are a number of other features, and I think they come out quite well in this. Again, quite a rare BBC video. It's a short one, it's a minute. I'll play this one to you because I think it illustrates the nature of these demos, or quite a few features of these demos.
That French people are always doing revolutions, making revolutions, burning bins and everything in the streets. Macron is very...
Okay, so I think that's the first thing. Again, is the level of sort of a low-level pyromania that's going on. Okay, let me continue. Go back to where I was.
Revolutions, burning bins and everything in the streets. Macron is violent too. This is really socially violent, economically violent, politically violent. He's our president and he doesn't do anything for us.
Okay, so two things there. You see how angry and fed up she is. That's the general mood. There's a feeling that we don't have anything to gain by stopping rioting, and we have nothing to lose. We're going down the tubes anyway. Also, the mob-handed coppers, they're tooled up for action. They can feel that it's serious, and it is. Okay, and then let's go here to the reporter.
Anything for us.
People you speak to in that crowd say this is about the sort of society they want to live in. It's about the...
Yeah, so it's not just about pensions, it's about the whole of society. This is only going to get worse. This isn't going away.
The relationship with the government and their views on President Macron, a president who is becoming increasingly controversial and they think is taking France in a direction which they are not happy with.
Okay, so it's about the nature of society, and it is focused on one person, and that person is the leader. That is pre-revolutionary. That is how revolutions, how breakdowns start.
Is it possible for this street movement, for these protests, is it possible for them to win? And if so, how?
In my opinion, no, but still it's the only way you have to protest, so we will continue even if it's not working.
This is the only solution we have. I think this is the best way, but I think this is not gonna, we are not gonna win this way.
Okay, you hear that? We are not going to win this way, what the fella said there. Now, I think they're not saying we're not going to win, so we're going to go home. They're saying, well, we've got nothing to lose. We might as well keep on doing it. We are going to keep going, even if it won't succeed this time. I think that means they want deeper change. We've lost on this individual issue. We want to change the structure of society so that we can win in future. Now, another feature that I observe here is the ethnic homogeneity of these demos. They're pretty much all white French in a society a country which is huge, massively enriched with basically a lot of North Africans and Sub-Saharan Africans. I think France is comfortably beyond 50% birth rate being non-white in France. I would say between 50 and 60%. And yet these demos, you see these demos illustrate the total racial ethnic separation of interests within France. Ethnic white French people, they're rioting because they want to see they would say, a better form of society. Now, I think I can illustrate this by showing you this demo recently against the pension reforms in Saint-Denis in Paris. It's one of the most revoltingly, disgustingly enriched holes in Europe. Don't go there. But look at this demo. It is not completely, but very, very largely. This area, I would say, Saint-Denis is almost completely enriched now. There are very few ethnic French live there. I don't know where these people have come from. But this demo in Saint-Denis is almost completely white French. Okay, one or two black faces, but very, very few, and certainly nothing like the cross section of Saint Denis. Just to show you what I mean. This is Saint Denis here. If I show you Saint Denis, this is from the Sun, 2018, so 5 years ago. Sitting on the edge, Paris may have up to 400,000 illegal immigrants crammed into just one tiny suburb. That's Saint Denis. There you are. There's some nice pictures of Saint Denis. I think we can say the status of Saint Denis is enriched. Look at that. That is Saint Denis. Tell me that's France. If you didn't have that sign there, where would you think that was? Ivory Coast? I don't know. Or look at this, the next one. If I show you this one. That is Saint Denis. That is a nice migrant camp next door to the Stade de France. That's the Olympic Stadium where the Olympics are going to be held next summer 2024. And look at them, police clear migrant camp in Paris. That is Saint Denis. Disgusting. So these are the people demonstrating in the middle of that enriched whole. So although you are not getting what one feature of these demos, as was the case with the Yellow Vest demos, is you are just not getting any mention of demographic issues, of ethnic issues, or of immigration, or repatriation, or of Frenchness at all. It's simply about economic entitlements that ethnic French people are insisting on. But that doesn't mean those concerns are absent. They are there. In contrast to Britain, concerns about immigration seem to be coming from above. If I show you, I want to show you this report because this is a feature of what is coming. If I get rid of that for the moment, these demos are purely about welfare and financial entitlements, and they are confined to white French people. And you would think from these demos that French people are not concerned. That is totally wrong. Ethnic division and mass migration and the issue of repatriation, that is going to arise in a big way because I think French people will resort to some form of military and security rule, and that it is military men, members of the security system, the security forces, they're the ones who are aware of the problem. And I want to show you this article here. This is France must drastically reduce immigration or become a third world country, says former head of intelligence agency. Each year we accept 450,000 people who have not contributed a cent to the infrastructure they will use from day one. So if I show you this, it is not the first time former security system director and former ambassador Pierre Brochon has made public calls for a complete change to immigration policies while warning against France becoming poorer and possibly descending into civil war. However, hearing him doing so during a discussion with a top civil servant in the person of the director of the French Office for Immigration and Integration on France culture, a state-owned radio station that is part of the very left-wing and pro-immigration Radio France network, is something unusual in Emmanuel Macron's France. Didier Leschi, OFI's director, did not try to hide the true numbers about immigration like Interior Minister General Darmanin usually does. So both men, Leschi and former intelligence chief Pierre Brochon, were able to talk about an agreed-upon set of data regarding immigration levels. 320,000 new residence permits delivered in 2022, plus 156 asylum seekers and additional number of 400,000 illegal immigrants benefiting from free migrants medical care scheme, which means their number is unknown. 400 illegal free medical care, plus a few 100,000 who have not yet asked for free migrants medical care, which means their numbers are unknown. As Leschi commented during the radio show, such illegal immigrants are usually granted a residence permit after 5 years of illegal residence in France. This, of course, acts as a pull factor contributing to the rising wave of illegal immigrants that are now flooding Italy. Now, the money quote from this former head of the security system is about welfare. He is joining up the dots. The French people will join up the dots. I'll explain why in a minute. But what he's saying is, 50 years ago, we had the best public services in the world. We were proud and the whole world envied them. Today, they are vilified by everyone and we complain about them. So what happened in between? The 35-hour work week cannot be ignored. It indeed played a role, but every year we accept 450,000 people who have not contributed a cent to the infrastructure they will use from day one. We have taken on board 2.6 million people, 2.6 million, in the last 5 years. How do you expect those people who then become over-consumers and under-contributors not to put unbearable pressure on public services? That is a lesson the ordinary French people are going to take on. And I think it is significant that that message is not coming from below, as it is in the UK. It is coming from above. I think that shows who the French people will turn to if the system breaks down. I think they will turn to military rule. I think that means they're likely to turn to violence and killing. This is what happens when a system breaks down. When you get a kind of revolutionary system, generally the first people who get strung up are the financiers, the bankers. So if you remember, I showed you that, I showed them invading the stock market there, and I showed invading Louis Vuitton, and then the offices of BlackRock. So no one likes a banker, no one likes a financier. They get strung up. Read Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, and the bit where Foulon, the financier, gets strung up. It's pretty gruesome stuff. That's what happens. And then people find, oh, we've strung up a load of bankers and we're still skint. Well, let's go and string up someone else. So they go and string up the politicians. The politicians are crafty. Most of them have hightailed it out. You might get a couple of junior politicians remaining who you can string up over a lamppost, maybe a couple of their research assistants. Incidentally, stringing up bankers, that happened during in Greece, not stringing them up, but burning them in buildings, or burning bank workers in buildings. That happened during the Greek financial crisis. So financiers get killed, and then politicians get killed, and then after that, well, we've killed the politicians and we're still skint. Then you go for cosmopolitans, and that basically means foreigners or people with foreign influence. In old days that meant aristocrats who'd married into foreign families or immigrants, but there's no shortage of foreigners within France now. They're going to be the target. They will get the blame for the collapse of that welfare system, and there's going to be trouble. There will be violence, and this is not going away. These troubles have been there for a long time. They've been on the boil for a decade. You remember the Yellow Vests protests from about November 2018 to about December 2019. People saying that they look pretty revolutionary. I think Macron breathed a sigh of relief, and he really pushed the COVID thing. That created lockdown, that got rid of the Yellow Vests. Now what you have is these current protests. They are picking up as if the Yellow Vest protests had never let off, so that as if the curve continued from 2019 to 2023. But you can go back a lot further than that, and this is why I think these protests are going to continue. So here's a story I love from 2013, a decade ago, just over, January 2013. France totally bankrupt, says Labour Minister Michel Sapin. France's Labour Minister sent the country into a state of shock on Monday after he described the nation as totally bankrupt. He said, "There is a state, but it is totally bankrupt. That is why we had to put a deficit reduction plan in place." That's why Macron's trying to increase the pension age. He wants to say he's got a deficit reduction plan in place. It's nothing of the sort. It won't work. It's a load of trivia, and nothing should make us turn away from that objective. So that was a politician in a rare moment of honesty. And then I think a thoroughly devious politician, Pierre Moscovici, the finance minister, he was wheeled out to say that those comments were inappropriate. France is a really solvent country. France is a really credible country. France is a country that is starting to recover. So even 10 years ago, everyone knew the French state was broke. They knew it. And again in 2013, again, this was November 2013, secret report warns France on verge of revolt on tax issue. This is how the Yellow Vests arose 5 years later, out of discontent about taxes. What you were getting is so much money's been pumped into European economies. A lot of that has attached itself to assets that you can lend against, particularly housing. House prices, particularly in the centre of town, have gone up and up and up. Ordinary people can't afford to buy houses, so they have to move out to the suburbs. They have to move beyond the inner suburbs, which are welfare ghettos. And so they have to drive a long way into town. They have to pay a lot of money on their petrol. They don't like the tax. That's how the Yellow Vest protests arose. And people were getting really angry about it. And they were doing things like pulling down speed traps, pulling down emissions detectors. And usually careful corps of prefects warns of a possible social explosion. What this is, there's once a year you get a State of the Union report in France where the prefects of the regions say how wonderful France is, how it's going from strength to strength. And this one talked about a possible social explosion. What it said, I find this amusing. A secret leaked document, what it said is, throughout French territory, society is in the grip of tension, exasperation and anger. It says the Ministry of the Interior's monthly summary of reports from 101 prefects, October 2013. And this mix of latent discontent and resignation erupts through sudden bouts of anger, almost spontaneous and not within structured social movements. So what we're seeing now is the increase of that curve, that protest curve is going up. It is accelerating. That's an exponential curve of people's dissatisfaction. That latent discontent and resignation. It's no longer latent. It's getting expressed. It's getting personalised and directed against Macron. Again, personal, permanent, and pervasive. And that caused one historian to say, are we really in 1789? If I translate that, are we really in 1789? The historian and writer Jean-Christian Petitfil believes that France is more on the verge of social explosion than a revolution. Well, I think now we can say it's probably, I'd say it's closer to revolution, breaking down the social order, collapsing the system of power. But it's not going to happen yet for a while. Again, I go back to this video that I showed you here, where there was some. I'll turn the sound off, but you can see that another feature of these demos is that the police, they're going in, they're mob-handed, but they're not really cracking skulls. I'm not aware that there have been any fatalities in these demos. It looks pretty serious, but everyone is within certain limits. So the protesters are not demolishing and setting fire to BlackRock and the stock exchange. They're not killing financiers within the stock exchange. They're not trying to demolish the Louis Vuitton building. They're setting fires like the ones you just saw there. They're setting fire to bins. They're setting fire to push bikes there, and blocking the road for a while, creating a blockage in ring roads in provincial towns. And the police are responding in a measured way. What this looks like to me is each side is quite serious at the moment, but they're just sizing each other up. They're squaring up. It's like the weigh-in before a boxing match. You're not going to get any split lips generally at the way into a boxing match, but people are eyeballing each other. I think that's what's going here. So in a revolutionary situation, basically you just get the powers that be just abandon power. Someone else storms in and grabs the power. In a pre-revolutionary system, you get lethal force used. People show, look, we're willing to kill either side. Usually you get someone, the government side kills someone, and then the opposition side kill more people on the government side. That's not happening yet. So I would say this is pre-revolutionary. That means I think it's got years to go. I think we've got a lot more fun and games to watch. But I don't think the revolution is breaking out tomorrow. The people have been telling me for 15 years that it's all going to collapse in 6 months' time. They're as wrong as they've been throughout the last 15 years. What I would expect to happen is this, that these protests will put more and more pressure on French finances, and the French will go crying to Germany saying, we want Euro bonds, i.e. we want you, Germany, to lend us money that we never have to repay, that you, Germany, are liable for. Germany's been resisting that for a decade. and it caved. Germany caved a little bit to the tune of 500. I think it was 500 million or 500 billion in I forget whether it was a million or a billion in during the Corona crisis, but basically saying that don't think this is going to be permanent. I think France is going to expect Germany to do this again. What I would expect to see is the protests will continue. I think Macron will continue to dig his heels in. I don't see how he can back down. He wants this cosmetic measure. I think he wants the markets to say France is serious about addressing its deficits, and then for him to get a breathing space for the rest of his presidency so that it doesn't fall apart on his watch. I think that's what he wants. There's nothing, that's the best you can possibly get over such trivial reforms. I don't think that's going to work. I think the protests are going to continue. I think they're going to ratchet up. I think they will become more pervasive and bigger, probably more violent. The deadline, I think, I would have thought would be the Olympics in the summer of next year in Incendiary, that enriched dirt hole that I just showed you earlier. If that is a failure, that looks really bad. I can see people starting to inquire into French finances and finding out that actually there are a lot of black holes, a lot of unexplained deficits in the French official figures, and France, I think, is going to go on the slide. I'd expect it then to turn to Germany. Germany might grudgingly hand over a little bit of money and then say, no, there's no more there. The fun and games start when desperate French rulers start getting patriotic and saying, it's all the Eurozone's fault. We will take ourselves out of the Eurozone. And the reason this is funny is because it's like a little dance that I think France and Germany are doing. France and Germany are the two pillars. If whichever one leaves first has the option of reducing the burden of debts, because there are massive debts on those countries, and let's say it's France. France might calculate. You might get a supposedly patriotic, economically illiterate leader, as I think they all are, saying, let's leave the Eurozone. If we do, the euro plummets in value. Our euro-denominated debts therefore plummet in value. We've wiped out half our debt as long as we can float the franc successfully. I don't think that'll work, but there's any port in a storm to a French leader. And as I speak, I would bet that there are warehouses dotted around France with loads of French francs, newly minted French francs in them, waiting for distribution at some unspecified date in the future. Probably on the Monday after the Friday, when the French and German leaders have got up and expressed their undying commitment to the Eurozone, and so that on the Monday the French ruler gets up and says, actually, we lied, we're getting out of the Eurozone, we've printed all these francs. No, the euro is no longer currency in France. It's the franc, and the euro is devalued, so the euro has fallen by 50%. So our debts have fallen by 50%. France has every incentive to leave the Eurozone. If that happens, you see the collapse of the euro and the Eurozone. What then about Spain? What about how do they raise finance? What about Italy? What about Portugal? What about Ireland and Greece? What about Germany? Germany has massive debts, huge pension debts that it just can't pay. I think the whole Eurozone falls over. I'm not an international financier, but I would have thought if the euro falls over, then the shadow banking system falls over. I read that there's about 48 trillion euros within the shadow banking system. I understand that's largely bonds, government debts. A lot of that is financial institutions balancing euro bonds against dollar bonds, or yen or Chinese bonds, all against each other, supposedly to create a balanced portfolio. If one pillar of that financial system suddenly gets swept away, I think you get some financial crisis or monetary crisis, currency crisis around the world, independently of the contagion effect. But if France, one of the two pillars of the Eurozone, falls over or just leaves the Eurozone, I don't see how the Eurozone survives. And I would have thought at that point that then those nation states right across Europe can no longer afford to pay for the welfare state. And at that point, it is no longer a case, as we saw there, it's no longer a case of changing the date for pensions from 62 to 64, it is suddenly you get no pensions paid at all. The whole of that line gets wiped out. And then you can't get an operation in hospital because cleaners and porters won't work if they're not paid. You get no dole money if you're unemployed. The schools close because teachers probably won't work if they're not going to get paid. And if the buildings can't get serviced, if they can't get heated in winter, are children really going to turn up there? If that happens, I think you will get demos like today's demos multiplied 10 or 20-fold. So you saw that fire that I showed you in that fire in Lyon. Imagine that those buildings all on fire. Imagine government buildings all on fire, just getting stormed. People will feel as though the sky has fallen on their head, and you'll just see the system will break down. People who run the system will scarper. There'll be a power vacuum. Someone else will grab it. That tends to be how revolutions work. And although I have the right to gloat and crow, if that happens, I will have the right I'll have bragging rights because I will have predicted it. I don't look forward to that, because in those circumstances, that is when you get a lot of killing. Violence, revolutions are really bloody, violent times, particularly if you have a collapse like this, where people are suddenly thrown out from under the welfare state. Suddenly the economy breaks down and people think that their God-given right to be cared for from cradle to grave, when suddenly that is taken away from people, you're going to get people very, very angry. If you combine that then with the really hostile, violent ethnic mix in right across Western Europe, but particularly in France, that is tailor-made for war. And then if you get military figures, renegade colonels, security chiefs, jumping into the power vacuum, I can't predict how that will go. The ingredients are not good. So when you see people like this, people like Owen Jones saying the French are kicking off, why aren't we? Let me just play just so you get a sense of what he's saying. I'll just play the first few seconds.
I love the smell of La Révolution in the evening.
Okay, that's enough of him. Don't think that's going to be nice. Don't be like Owen Jones. Don't say, yes, we should kick off like the French. No, don't. Take this as a lesson not to be like the French. It is to our credit that we're not setting fire to piles of uncollected rubbish in the streets. We're not performing brilliantly at the moment, I have to say, but that at least is to our credit. What we need is, when this breaks down, our economy will break. If the Eurozone economy breaks down, ours will break down as well. We won't suddenly find we're elevated by it. We will go down too. What matters is when the system breaks down, when the hospitals close, when the schools close, when pensions stop getting paid, when the welfare check stops landing on the mat, everyone's angry and people don't know where to turn. It is the solution is not to go burning down your town hall. It is not to look for a financier or a politician to string up over a lamppost. The solution is to find a way to impose law and order on yourselves. The order that the state has imposed, that will go. The way to get through so dangerous a change peacefully is to be able to club together to create law, to create order for ourselves, without the state, without the taxman, without all that apparatus, to create that apparatus ourselves. The state will not be able to do it. It will not be able to come back. If people want it back, people will immediately demand that it institute the old welfare rights, which it won't be able to do, and it will collapse over again. We will have to find a way to create law for ourselves, like joining a club in a DIY fashion. That is what I will go touting around, not to make money, not to get power. There's no power or money in that, but so that people can be safe, so that people can continue to trade, so that people can continue to be safe and prosperous and to live peaceful lives. I don't think that is going to happen in France. Keep watching what is going on, even if the BBC are not reporting on it enough. It is a long, slow motion car crash into the breakdown. Ultimately, I think that breakdown will be a very good thing. I think we'll come out the other side of it much better, with a much healthier society, without the unnecessary evil of the state. But the transition could be very painful. I think France and some other European countries will be an object lesson in what not to do. Thank you.